though they spent all their daytime together. At night, he chose to sleep alone in a lumpy Volkswagen-shaped bed at the southernmost boundary of the absolutely lovely forest in which their home had been constructed. There, the border between verdant woods and the brim of obscurity that stretched on forever, a sea of fog that roiled and swirled itself into small, murmuring vortexes, from which depths one could occasionally hear something like a human voice pleading for absolution, or at least a back scratcher to relieve this awful itch. He had made his bed, and there, with a night light from his old nursery, and his old vacuum tube radio that played nothing but big band dance music from the 1920s, and a few favorite books, and a little fresh fruit he had picked on his way from the house to his resting place, he slept peacefully every night, except for the nightmares, of course. So begins, more or less, Susan by Harlan Ellison, a very short story, less than 1,200 words in total. And Alex, why don't you tell us a little bit about where this story originates from?
Yeah, it's a very unusual sort of origin. So Harlan Ellison, we had been watching his old um, uh, segment on the Sci-Fi Buzz show from the early 90s science fiction sci-fi channel. And there's one segment where he talks about this book, Minefields by Jacek Jurka, who's a Polish, I guess you'd say surrealist painter, but somebody I think asked him to do an introduction to the book, but he was like so struck by the artwork, he actually just wanted to write a story for each picture, which in itself is a really cool idea. But there's one painting in here which I don't think the paintings actually have names. But so there's this painting right here. That glare, yeah. So you've got this bed and the radio and this kind of ocean back there. This is very cozy scene, but uh Harlan writes this story that's very, I don't know, like uh pleasant in some ways, very mournful or like wistful in other ways. It still
Hmm.
has that undercurrent of danger.
Hmm.
Um and but yeah, so he wrote this, and then on the segment of the Harlan Ellison's watching the TV program, he read this story very nicely. They had the some accompaniment, some music and sound, which was very nice. So yeah, that's how we got introduced to it. And then I ordered
Right.
the book and wanted to read the rest of the stories. And um, yeah,
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, that segment on Harlan Ellison's watching on Sci-Fi Buzz, that was where I saw it for the first time too, and just was immediately taken by it. It's worth just talking about Harlan Ellison's watching for a minute too, and
oh
maybe I
yeah,
guess for some viewers, who Harlan Ellison is. I'm sure you know or can easily find out. Um, but that segment was really instrumental for me, I think, getting back into reading because he would always do these short bits. They're all on YouTube. We'll link to the one where he reads Susan
hmm
somewhere, so you can follow along with the story, and it's just an incredible reading of it. But from there, go back and watch some of the other segments of Harlan Ellison's watching because they're excellent. And I think uh, in some of them, he's just berating you, the viewer, for being functionally illiterate because you haven't read the litany of science fiction authors that he's about to tell you about. And so, one of these segments, he's yelling about all the authors you haven't read. If you haven't read Jack Vance and Cordwainer Smith and Poul Anderson and Kate Wilhelm and Lee Brackett and Avram Davidson, then you're functionally illiterate. And I suppose some people might just be insulted and switch off at that point. But you and I were writing down the names of
yeah,
authors and decided, okay, well, we'll check some of these guys and gals out. And then it was a laborious process of trying to find a bookstore that stocked any of these authors because
Yeah.
most of them were at that time especially almost entirely out of print. And so we finally found a used bookstore that carried many of them. And that was for me, my door back into reading again.
Yeah,
And so,
pretty much.
yeah.
Same.
Yeah, and Susan was kind of caught up in that this really amazing short story. And I guess I just want to say real quick, I find that a lot of my own favorite short stories, they tend to be kind of on the longer end, like the novelette length, 10,000 words or over, or they tend to be extremely short, like this one, like a lot of Borges's fiction. I'm thinking
Hmm.
of one of my favorite, maybe my favorite Gene Wolfe story is The Death of the Island Doctor, which is like 3 pages. Um, these very short stories. But what can often happen, I think, with stories this short is they tend to be um, maybe either a little too structured, like they're very kind of just describing events very quickly and you're kind of skimming over something that's happening, or they tend to almost be structured like jokes where there's a setup and then the final line, the final paragraph, whatever, is a twist ending or something that just kind of uh, turns the whole story on its head. Just because, like Oh Henry or stuff like this. Um, but uh, this story is not like that. It's atmospheric. It's a little bit slow. Um, and kind of it almost fades in and fades out, and that's very hard to achieve that and to achieve two really likable characters, to achieve a whole kind of imagined world and an atmosphere that lingers in just 1,200 words. And of course, the painting helps with that. Being able to look at
Hmm.
it as you're reading helps to build up that atmosphere. But it really is a marvel what Ellison is able to do with just a few pages, or 1 page, I guess, in the actual Minefield book, right? Minefield's book.
Yeah, and it is just takes up one page.
Hmm.
And that's what I like. One of the things I like about it mainly is just that you get in, get out kind of feel of it. You're given this glimpse, and you get a lot of the atmosphere. But it also has this undercurrent of like the um yeah, this kind of like love or relationship that's in this realm. And yeah, I think that really makes it, yeah, like makes the story. That's why the story was written, kind of
Yeah. Do you,
like
do you want to talk?
other than the painting itself.
Mhm.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, and I guess it's worth mentioning the backstory of the painting or excuse me, not the painting, the story as well, because Harlan
Yeah,
Ellison.
I'm not sure how much I know on that. I
Yeah.
mean, I know that sort of the yeah, his wife's name is Susan, was
Hmm.
Susan that but yeah, I don't know what
Yeah.
you know.
In broad strokes, I guess Harlan Ellison, famously irascible, cantankerous figure, and somebody who was, by his own admission, difficult to live with. He had married previously, I believe, 4 times before he met uh, his wife, who would be his wife for the rest of his life and until his death. Sadly, she also passed away soon after. Um, but yes, so he had been in these multiple failed marriages before, kind of feeling like maybe that aspect of his life was never going to work out or was over with. And then he meets Susan at a convention, I think, in the UK, because I believe she's British. And was part of the British science fiction fan community. Um, they fell in love, they got married, and then uh, somehow made it work for the last couple of decades of their lives. And this story has that backstory at the back of it. I remember too, I think you told me about this. There's an Ellison story written before he met Susan, where he's describing um, kind of being in failed relationships and almost like being a starfish, losing arms and having them grow
Oh yeah.
back, but not, there being a limit to how much you can
Yeah.
recover from these things. Um, and so he was, I think, kind of feeling that uh, that aspect of his life, that book was kind of closing on him before he met Susan. Um, but what's interesting about this story, I think, is you don't have to know any of that to enjoy and appreciate the story, and in some ways intuit all of those things. Whether or not it's the author's personal experience, I think it's all there in the story. And It's interesting backstory, interesting confirmation for a reader to be like, oh, okay, those things are present in the story. Um, it's all there on the page, very beautifully laid out. But um, I guess before we dive into, because I'd kind of like to go, it's such a short story that we could go almost line by line in a way and just kind of work our way through it chronologically. But before we do that, um, we're talking about this Harlan Ellison story that we love. Alex, what are your thoughts on Harlan Ellison's fiction in general? That's kind of a loaded question, I guess.
Yeah. I've I haven't read. I have really not like not a lot of it. You know, um, it's kind of the thing where I'm like sometimes I read some of his nonfiction, a lot of his nonfiction. I've read more of that than his fiction actually.
Hmm.
I've listened to him talk more than I've like read some of his fiction. I think that that's just happened naturally. Maybe I've gravitated more towards his nonfiction.
Hmm.
But I've read, some of the big short stories like I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, Jeff D is Five, The Whimper of Whip Dogs, yeah, some of those. But uh yeah, there's an abrasiveness, like in his stories. There's this kind of quality that feels like I don't know, just very agitated and like adolescent in the amount of uh like I don't know, just like emotion being spewed and the rapidity of it and whatnot. And sometimes I chafe like under that. I mean his nonfiction writing is like that a lot, but at the same time, like when he really is in rapture of something, then it's a lot more fun to read, I think. Especially when he's like in Harlan Ellison's watching the book of his film columns, like he when he really loves a movie and he's just selling you on it, it's like beautiful writing um in that regard. Yeah. And I think I have, yeah, it's over on that shelf. But
Yeah, I just looked behind me because I realized it's right there. Yeah,
yeah.
I should have had that up on the shelf instead of
Oh
Citadel of
yeah,
the
I was
Autark, but
wondering
yeah.
what.
Um, yeah, very similarly to you, I've read a few of his fiction collections, and I've hit a lot of the big ones, like Jeff D is Five, Mephisto and Onyx, The Man Who Rode Christopher Columbus to Shore, I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. You could go on and on. I've read a lot of them, and a lot of kind of the essential ones. And my opinion on his fiction is pretty mixed. I, like you, really enjoy his nonfiction. I think in some ways the public figure Harlan Ellison is maybe Harlan Ellison's best creation, or or
Hmm.
uh, or most enjoyable one to engage with. Yeah, when you agree with him, especially if he's in a positive mode, praising something, a book or a film that you like and he likes, it's just like, you know, uh, it's heaven. But and when um, when he's spewing all over something that you dislike and he dislikes, it's also, a lot of fun. And then when you disagree, it can be fun to kind of be like, what is this idiot going on about? I think that's kind of part of the fun of that very sort of back and forth quality that he has. His fiction similarly provokes extreme reactions in me. I love some of his stories. The one we're going to read today is maybe my favorite short story. It's definitely up there. Um, and Grail, I remember being really good. I Have No Mouth
Oh
and I
yeah.
Must Scream, chilling, and certainly memorable. There are a lot of great stories like that, but then there are others that feel very um, preachy, almost like an atheist humanist version of a bad Christian movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, some of them, and even some of the ones that are really beloved. Like I think Repent Harlequin said the TikTok Man is
Oh,
not a very good story. Um, and
yeah. No, I was reading that on a train one time, and I was like, I feel like I wrote something like this in high school.
mhm. Yeah, I know. And then some of it, even some of the stories that I think are really great, like Jeffy is five, there is an almost the extremity of the story. There's kind of a tragic element to that story, but it's so extremely depicted that it almost comes across as funny. Like something Oscar Wilde said about um, a Dickens story once that it's where it's sort of the tragic aspect of that story is just borderline ridiculous. Um, and so I have very mixed feelings about his fiction. I heard somewhere, it might have been his biographer who said this, I don't remember, but I heard someone say that there's not a lot of critical analysis of Ellison's work because in a lot of ways he doesn't allow for it. Like it's so out there and on the page. It's so obvious what he's trying to say and what he's trying to get across. He wants you to know. He wants you to feel the extreme reaction of whatever the theme of the story is, or even the moral of the story. You could even be that bald about what he's doing. Um, that there's almost nothing for a critic to write about. Or a scholar to write about just because it's so, Ellison kind of does all that work for you.
Well,
And I don't
yeah,
know.
like, there was
Yeah.
I've read Spider Kiss actually,
Hmm.
which is the only novel, like not the only, it's one of the only like novel length um stories, like I think of his. And I read that, and there's a part in it where like the main character, you're reading about this like rock star. He's um there's like this groupie or this like fan who he like bedded, and then they're talking about it later on that like there's some problem, or like I think he gets this girl pregnant and everything, and there's this all drama, and then like Harlan Ellison kind of does this reveal that like, oh, she's black, and then like there's some other drama there, but he does it in this manner that where you can just feel his like finger pointing out of the book. He's like, aha, I bet you thought it was a white girl, you racist. Like he
Hmm.
does it in that kind of manner, and I'm just like, oh, okay, like all right, like there's this.
Yeah, yeah, and that's true in a lot of it, which makes Susan kind of an interesting outlier because it's such a sweet story, and he's written other stuff that's very sweet too, and I think that's definitely even a part of his public persona is that when he loves somebody or loves something, he's very sincere and very um, articulate about why he loves it.
Mhm.
But yeah, there is that kind of tenderness and kind of a subtlety to this story that I think is pretty unique. Um, yeah, yeah, I remember there's one, I think it's in Slippage, that collection, where there's a story, I think about a somebody who was maybe an SS officer or an Auschwitz guard or something, and he after World War II, and he's hunted down and killed by fairies or elves who had like lived uh in the wood that was used to fire up the crematoriums in the concentration camps or something. And it's just like these very kind of yeah, these just very sort of blunt, straightforward, you couldn't possibly miss what it is that he's saying. And
Mhm.
sometimes it's difficult to get to kind of the universal or the shared reality of that from his stories because it's just he wants you to so specifically draw something out of it. But Susan, I think is a story that really does that. So maybe we can just jump right in and kind of take it. So the segment we read earlier wasn't quite the very beginning of the story. So here's the
Yes.
opening line. As she had done every night since they met, she went in bare feet and a cantaloupe meat colored night shift to the shore of the sea of mist, the verge of the ocean of smothering vapor, the edge of the bewildering haze he called the brim of obscurity. So that opening line, I think, is great because it sets up kind of the two worlds in which the story lives. Um, you have throughout the story this kind of very realistic, very sort of 1980s, 1990s aspect to it that kind of plants it in our world in a sense. But then you have this fantastical, almost mythic fairy tale element to it as well. So you have the cantaloupe meat colored night shift, this very specific detail, which to me just makes me think of yeah, like a woman from the late 80s watching the Home Shopping Channel and about to go to bed, or just, yeah, I don't know. The image that I have in my head is like you go to a friend's house for a sleepover in the 90s, and your friend's mom walks in and starts yelling at you to be quiet because you're being too loud like after midnight or something. Um, but that very specific detail. And then you have this other language of the shore of the sea of mist, uh, the brim of obscurity, the stuff that kind of very much pushes you into that setting, that fantastical setting. The story exists in both worlds, and right from the opening line, you kind of get that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
The
then
brim
as
of obscurity, that's a very Ellison-esque, like very Ellison like name.
mhm.
I don't know. Maybe it's just because I've heard him like his I can hear his voice
Yeah.
saying it.
Yeah. But I get what you mean. Yeah, like the Guardian of Forever or stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Totally. And I guess because we're talking about the story's atmosphere and its subtlety and that kind of stuff, it's interesting because they always say, like, well, from the opening line, you should hook your reader, you should have them kind of propelled through the story. But, you know, nobody's walking into the room holding a gun in paragraph one or even paragraph two or three.
Yeah.
So, what is it that propels us from the beginning of this story through to the end? I think I would just, I guess I would submit right off the top is it's this sense of mystery. Like, okay, she's going here to this place. Why are we kind of in these two worlds of the real and the fantastical? Why is she going there? What is it that's down in there? And who is we have this woman who's established, but who's the he? Who's the man? And what's his deal? I think it's that sense of mystery that kind of propels us forward.
And that's the thing too. It's like sometimes you gotta like the reader has to do a little bit of like, you know, providing a little bit of momentum, like getting
Hmm.
into it. Like I don't think you should bend over backwards to try and hook the reader in a way.
Yeah.
Like you have to move, you have to make an effort to get into it. All I know is that like, you know, it gives you the like decent lead in with the yeah, just like this I mean that first paragraph in itself is just nice in itself.
It's
Like
cozy.
yeah,
There's a
it is.
coziness to it.
It's like you don't have to go any further than that. It's a good image. Like the image itself is your it's kind of yeah, just enough.
Yeah, yeah. And then as it kind of takes you into the world of the painting, which is on the opposite page to the story, you get some of those details in. Um, the yeah, the Volkswagen shaped bed, the old vacuum tube radio that played nothing but big band dance music from the 1920s, a little fresh fruit that he picked on his way from the house to his resting place. You've got that coziness, and then you have the hook of except for the nightmares, of course. So you do have something threatening, something.
But he's lulled you in by that
Yes,
point.
yeah, definitely. But the coziness, can't be overemphasized. It's one of the things I really love about the story, that atmosphere of it. You do kind of want to bathe in the world that he and Jacek Yurka have established.
Oh yeah, I mean it's I like honestly like, and a lot of Yurka's paintings are cozy, I would say, even though there's sometimes a darkness to them, but
Hmm.
it's subtle. It's subtle enough, but it has this very distinct Eastern European flavor that I really like.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I thought it was an interesting detail because Ellison, when he's talking about the collaboration that he kind of initiated on his own, I almost wonder like what Jacek Yurka's reaction was to this book coming out, if
Yeah,
he even
I've
knew
always
who
wondered
Harlan
that
Ellison
too.
was. Yeah, because it's like, oh, you think your art book's coming out in America, and then all of a sudden, like, well, who's this other guy who's sharing half of the credit and titling my artwork and recontextualizing it narratively. I mean, maybe he was excited about that, but I just think it's interesting. I wonder how much say he even had in that process. I wonder. But I thought it was an interesting detail that Ellison added. Just kind of that he lived on a farm and with his family. Some of those things reminded me of Dado. Obviously, his artwork is very different, but
Yeah,
just kind of that work ethic and that where he lived and his approach to art
yeah,
made
and
me
I think
think of that.
his living on a farm is or in the country, I think is a very ideal thing for an artist.
Hmm.
One side note I want to mention is this other painting in the book, um, this one right here,
Hmm.
which has the story Ellison Wonderland. Um, yeah, the so Harlan Ellison was like going on about how much he loved this painting, and there was an episode of of the Tom Snyder's his like late night show,
Hmm.
and Harlan Ellison was on there, and they're talking about it, and then at some point in the episode, Tom Snyder like has someone bring out on stage the actual painting, and it's been made as a gift to Harlan.
It's the only time I've ever seen him speechless.
Yeah, and all Tom Snyder said just gotcha.
That is such a great moment of television.
Oh my gosh, yeah,
Yeah.
I love all the Tom Snyder, Harlan Ellison like appearance like
Hmm.
discussions meetings because it seems like he was kind of a good match for Harlan
Yeah,
in
he
some
wasn't
ways.
intimidated by him the way that some other interviewers might be, but at the same time, it wasn't. I don't know. They had like this mutual respect where it didn't devolve into uh, a boxing match or anything.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. But yeah, moving on through the story, I just want to not going to spend too much time focusing on the details of it, but this one paragraph I thought was really interesting, just from a technical standpoint. Um, so it follows the revelation where he tells her this is kind of a flashback. You're seeing how they meet before they get married. The man says, "My nightmares come to life," and then we have this paragraph, which remark thereupon initiated quite a long and detailed conversation between them. It went through all the usual stages of good natured chiding, disbelief, ridicule, short lived anger at the possibility he was making fun of her, toying with her, on into another kind of disbelief, argument with recourse to logic and Occam's razor, grudging acceptance, a brief lapse into incredulity, a return to the barest belief, and finally, with trust acceptance that he was telling her nothing less than the truth. One thing I like about that, so it's funny. It's got that kind of Harlan Ellison run on, babada babada boo sort of humor that actually shows up, even a couple paragraphs before, talking about a problem being easy to reconcile. So it's got that sense of humor that Ellison has, but it's also very efficient because I think in another story, this paragraph could have been longer than the entirety of the story itself. Just like a long dialogue scene where in real time you get, the responses of the wife to be being indignant and him trying to convince her and that kind of just ballooning out. But this using humor kind of compresses that, and at the same, so it's efficient, but it's also really relatable because I think you need to acknowledge how hard it would be for her to believe that this is happening and be brought on board with it, which I think enhances the relatability of the characters. You understand where they're coming from. Because I think if this was left out entirely, um, it sort of puts up a wall where you're like, okay, well, they live in that world. But if I was in this world, I would have disbelief. I don't know how I would get to the place that they're at. Ellison lets you go in on that, but he doesn't make that the whole story. It's in its proper place. Doesn't take up too much of the word count, but he gets you in your there just enough. He uses kind of sort of humor to carry you through it, but it's just the right amount. It's very efficient storytelling.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah. And then you have this long middle section here, which is very sweet, kind of talking about the dynamics of their relationship. You get a few more kind of modern details about, yeah, him making her morning tea or pouring a bowl of banana nut crunch cereal, which again strikes me as a very sort of 80s, 90s thing. Uh, her laying in bed reading and watching the Home Shopping Channel, which I mentioned before. Um, and then, later on, her following the 27 plugged together extension cords, each one 30 feet long, that led from his house to his nightlight. So there are these details of how, um, you know, how his radio and his nightlight and stuff are
Hmm.
powered, which I think is fun. Um, and uh, and you also have this detail kind of in the middle of that, again, keeping the story's focus where it needs to be. He slept at the brim of obscurity, and he was a danger to no one but himself. And whatever means he used to protect himself from those dark time sojourners, his nightmares, well, it was an armory kept most secret. So again, I think there's another version of this story where most of it is about him fighting his nightmares and uh, how he goes about doing that and that aspect. But that's not what the story is about. It's about this relationship between the man and the woman. It's good to acknowledge that the other stuff is going on, that these aren't just kind of, I don't know, floating invisible things that have no effect on him. It's important to know that they are negatively oppressing him and he has to fight back. But again, not making it into an action story where he's slaying sort of the dragons of sleep the whole time. I like that it's kept in the background. He doesn't feel the need to explain it. We're seeing things from her perspective anyway throughout the story. We don't really get into his head unless we're also in her head, seeing it through her eyes. So that's kept to the background. We don't really need to know about that. Um, Now, this one I did want to ask you about specifically because you have the book and you have a higher resolution version of the painting that I've been looking at. There's this
Hmm.
little line that I don't understand. Um, he's, yeah, describing the setting of the painting again. And there's a line, the light was on, an apple ready to be nibbled sat atop a stack of books awaiting his attention. The intaglio of a tesseract, or possibly a dove on the wing, lay in the center of a perfectly circular depression in his pillow where he had rested his head. What's that about? I'm as
Yeah,
it.
I was looking myself. I think that's just an interpretive, like,
Mm,
you know, um, just kind of, yeah, like a Rorschach kind of
mhm.
test on
Yeah,
this section right here, because there really is no specific um discernible image within that depression. It's just Harlan Ellison's own
mhm.
like drawing out of it.
Yeah. He's just kind of saying, I'm not really sure what's in this painting, but here's two
Yeah,
possibilities.
or he just, yeah, it's just it's there
Hmm.
somewhere.
Yeah, interesting. That's kind of what I thought, but I thought I'd
Hmm.
mention it just because it's an odd detail or lack of detail, as the case may be. But yes, here at the end, we actually do kind of end up in real time, and there's a dialogue scene, actual back and forth, not a summary like the previous paragraph. Um, and we kind of end up in real time. The man is upset, he's crying, he's sobbing uncontrollably. Um, the woman says, "I'm so sorry. Uh, I see now that I've made you unhappy. I don't know how, but I can see that I've come into your life and made it unpleasant." And so we have conflict, and we have another mystery. We've kind of had this very sweet passage talking about the dynamics of their relationship, him making her breakfast, her ritual of coming down and kissing him goodnight as he stays in that bed to keep the nightmares away from her. Um, but the story ends not on that kind of sweet note, but on more of a mournful note. What do you make of that?
I don't know. I mean, it's yeah, you would think it would end more happily, but
Mhm.
yeah, it's just his, I don't know, bitterness at not yeah, not being able to have sort of yeah, found somebody like this sooner.
Hmm.
Although I do want to add something because Harlan Ellison, he did like commentary for some of the paintings or
Hmm.
from some of his stories on the paintings. I mean, like one of them's longer than the actual story itself. Um, but for Susan, he just says, my wife's name is Susan. Some idiot reviewers have said that this epigraphic fable is autobiographical. They are fools with lumps of coal for hearts. This is a valentine pure and simple. To the sun in my sky, and a little lament for lost time, the first old man thoughts I've ever had.
Hmm. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, that
I think that about sums it up. Um, yeah. Okay, it's not autobiographical. I buy
yeah.
that. Yeah, very, very good.
How many
Um,
wives did you have before?
didn't you write a book called Stalking the Nightmare? Uh, anyway, yeah. But very, very true. Those kind of old man thoughts coming out. But I like that the story ends. I like that it's just not kind of happiness, sort of love
Hmm.
conquers all the way through. Because I think in this life, if you have these negative experiences, if you do go through failed relationships, there are scars that are left behind. Um, you know, uh, you could say in this story, like maybe love conquers all, but it doesn't mean that there aren't battle scars left from
Yeah.
that experience or lost time.
Or at least
Um,
in this case, like they don't even really like I mean there's a solution for this problem that he finds, but more like it's mainly just about understanding between
mhm.
them
Right.
about what that is. So it's he says like, the voices whose these demented nightmares whose voices were now they understood, less filled with rage than with despair,
Hmm.
is the last line.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it's just more about understanding a problem or this curse as he puts it.
Right. And I think that's interesting how there's another kind of throwaway line in the second to last paragraph. But after a while, still holding her there at the brim of obscurity, and then in parentheses, which in an earlier time had been known as the rim of oblivion. And I think that's also a similar kind of recontextualizing that it's okay, we thought it was oblivion, right? Just,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
as it says, being obliterated, nothingness, destruction, but it's obscurity. It's something that's unknown, maybe impenetrable, something that's difficult, but that doesn't necessarily, it's not as necessarily as apocalyptic as all
Yeah,
that.
it's less bad. It's
Yeah.
it's a little more graspable.
Hmm. Exactly. Yeah. But the problem doesn't go away just because it's understood or just because there's this positive aspect. Like, okay, well, we can live with the nightmares. They might not go away, but and that's kind of part of the tragedy of it as well, that, we are limited, we are imperfect, and those don't just go away because we found love. It's but it is being able to work with that and work through that. And I think the complexity of ending it on that mournful note in some ways makes the rest of the story that much sweeter as well. Because it is, yeah, that love kind of at the edge of darkness, not negating it,
Hmm.
but shining in spite of it as well. Um, Yeah, and I suppose too, Harlan Ellison would not like this comparison, but you know that the image of Christ in heaven still bearing the scars of the crucifixion as well, the
Hmm.
ultimate act of love. That yeah, that our sin and that our um, the evil that has taken place and is taking place in this world is born on him who is perfect, and that is ca even carried forward into heaven. The scars of that. Um, in spite of kind of the beatific vision and the perfection of the new heavens and new earth, those scars are still carried forward, and I think that's
Hmm.
one of the things that really resonates for me in this story, and that's what brings it beyond. I think if this had just been an autobiographical recounting of his meeting Susan and him dealing with the his baggage from his failed marriages and whatnot. It'd be interesting as a fan of Harlan Ellison. I'm sure there'd be something relatable about it. But I think that's the beauty of fantasy and the beauty of a story like this is that it takes the specific and it makes it universal. It makes it part of a shared experience. Because the things that Harlan Ellison went through with Susan are bigger than them. And there are things that other people do go through. And so being able to bring that out to its proper scale, that pain, that loss, that darkness, and that love. It's something much greater than two specific people at a certain period in time being in love. And I think blowing that up and in a metaphysical way, Ellison, I guess, would say a metaphorical way, although I think that again kind of limits it, um, is really the way to go. And so you may call this story autobiographical, but I think it's really potent and it's really something that I think any reader can understand and resonate with.
Yeah, and that's why it's yeah one that I've kind of remembered fondly, more fondly among his stories.
Hmm. Yeah, same. It's one of my very favorites. It just very short stories of this length. It's really hard to do because they kind of in order to be good, they almost can't be denied. Because like a novel, can have a nice scene here or there, and maybe you'll just remember like one great scene from a novel, or a series of novels, a long work. But if you write a story that you can read in 5 minutes,
Hmm.
you can't hide anything. Like it's either great or it's not. You're going to forget about it immediately, or you're never going to forget it. And you got to kind of get in and get out and make that work. And a lot of other authors, they'll try to do that through technical tricks, doing something that's very plot heavy, or doing something, like I said, that's almost structured like a joke, like a O. Henry story or a Robert Sheckley story with a twist ending. Um, but Susan is none of that. It's atmospheric, it's slow, it kind of gets under your skin, it's cozy, um, but it's really beautiful and somehow, in spite of its brevity, just I think just kind of opens up and is ends up being just such a gorgeous, gorgeous little gem of a story.